So good day, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday, as a lot of people have said. It's February 22nd, 2022, in a lot of places around the world. So, welcome to our February Incubating Leadership Conversation. These conversations are organized by the Leadership Forum community, a nonprofit 501c3 focused on expanding conscious leadership. You can learn more about the organization or find ways to get involved by visiting our website at leadershipforumcommunity.org or by inquiring in the chat, here during the session, and somebody will definitely reach out to you and make sure you're taken care of. My name is Matthew. I'm an officer within the community, and I'm pleased to present our topic of discussion for today, unlearning racism, and how can a polarity approach help us expand conscious leadership. I'll be co-facilitating with my partner Joel here, my colleague Joel, and we are looking forward to hopefully shedding some enlightenment on this topic. Joel, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So just a quick run through of the agenda. We welcome agenda. We'll go into our purpose. We'll then do a little icebreaker and go into a breakout session. We'll debrief. We'll come back and debrief. We'll kind of dive deeper into the give an overview of polarity approach, go into another breakout session, come back, debrief, good dialogue, then have some closing and share with you some next steps on how you can continue to develop as a leader. Next slide, Joel. So before we really dive in, I just want to take a quick pause real quick and ask a real candid question. In chat, how many of you think we'll be able to tackle the entire subject of racism in an hour? Let alone unlearn racism. Put your answer in the chat. Real candid, real, upfront. I see it. No, not a chance. No way. No way. Oh man, you guys have no faith in us, huh? That's fine. No, yeah, obviously, right. So getting a lot of no ways, no's, we wish, right? If it was easy, anybody would do it. But so the purpose of that question really was just to set some expectations, given that the purpose of the Leadership Forum community is to expand conscious leadership. One way to grow as a leader is we want to become more aware of ourselves and about the leadership topics of our times. So this is to expand understanding, which can hopefully help us better engage with challenging topics and contexts and inspiring others to build a better tomorrow. So with that, racism being one of the most pressing leadership challenges of our time, it's imperative that in order to do this type of work, we need to have a community that provides a psychological safety by taking time to hear and be curious about our different perspectives, thoughts, and ideas and ways of being. We also need tools to help us engage with topics that enables others to contribute, process, and deepen their understanding. So this session was partnered with the Unlearning Racism Lab, and we have found polarity thinking and polarity mapping to be two tools that aid us in our engagement with challenging topics and contexts. We'll dive deeper into polarity thinking and polarity mapping in a little while, but we hope that you walk away with something that will help you better engage with unlearning racism. So next slide. So quick icebreaker here. Take a quick second to look at this picture here on your right-hand side, and in the chat, just place, what do you see? Rectangles, squares, do you see circles? I see rectangles, I see both. Both. Oh, a lot of both. I don't know, I might quiz somebody and ask you to point out the circles. Rectangles. Yep, I see a lot of rectangles. It's all rectangle first. Nice. Okay, cool. Well, if you said squares or rectangles, you are correct. Joel, you can point those out there. You can see them very easily defined with the yellow lines here. Somebody said both eventually. But to that point, if you also said circles, you are also correct. As the highlights show them right there. You might have not seen them at first. I know, honestly, I did not see them at first. I was like, rectangles, the squares, nothing else. But as you see, if you said either or both, you are correct. And we can show the kind of side-by-side comparison of the squares and rectangles right there in the picture, just so nobody thinks we're pulling a fast one on them if you didn't see one of the others. So the purpose of that exercise, one of the key realizations that we're hoping that you're gaining here is that, we see what we see, and we must recognize that others may have another perspective as well. We all have blind spots, and we all can't possibly see everything in its totality. And that's part of the benefit of having multiple experiences and perspectives come together to help us see the complete picture. The polarity approach is one way to organize wisdom of key stakeholders to be more intentional in our actions. And this connects with the LFC purpose to expand conscious leadership in a more intentional and be more intentional about our impact. So Joe, if you don't mind going to the next slide, thank you. So as we talk about the benefits of hearing multiple experiences, we want to get ready to hear about your individual experience as a growing leader. We're going to get ready to head out into breakout rooms shortly, but just kind of as a prep, I want you to begin to think about your own life journey. Where has it begun and who it began with? Where you were born? Where were you born? Were you born into a family? Different classes, different cultures, different even geographical locations. What expectations did those around you have for you? What benefits and challenges did you face? And how did entitlement influence your thinking? These are questions that we want you to begin kind of mulling over as we're getting ready to head into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes or so. We'll have about 3 people per room. And after you share, we'll come back to the main room and debrief as a larger group. So I just want to clarify, am I doing the breakout rooms, or is someone else able to do the breakout rooms? If not, I can get it set up real quick.
Yeah, Matthew, if you can just tumble them into breakout rooms.
Just put the questions in chat, everybody.
Yep, and Eileen put.
Yeah, I put the chat questions in. The breakout questions are in chat.
Eileen, did you send them to everyone?
Yes, I put, if you look in chat, everyone, can you see if I did it right?
So Eileen, I'm not seeing them out there. So in your to section, you just need to make sure that bottom arrow says to everyone.
It does. That's what it says. That's weird. Huh.
Give it another try.
All right. Could be user error. I don't know, guys. Oh, okay. Matthew did it. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
No, you're fine.
And I'm frozen for some reason, so I can't move forward.
All good. So everyone, the question should be in the chat for your refresher, and we will get ready to head out into breakout rooms in order to have a deeper dialogue.
Oh, user error. I forgot to press enter.
And we'll see everyone back in 10 minutes. Welcome back. And I got to admit somebody else here. And as you can tell, we've stopped the jackhammer that was in the background earlier. Matthew was, of all the days, all of a sudden, right when he starts speaking, the jackhammer was starting. But, life rolls on. Go ahead, Matthew.
No, thanks, Joe. Yeah, didn't see that coming, so apologies. I believe everybody has returned. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So cool. Hopefully that was a great breakout session for everybody and kind of insightful. I just wanted to kind of open up the floor here for a little bit and just kind of check in and see if anybody wants to share any commonalities that they experience within their group, any anything that you appreciated about somebody else's story, anything of that nature that it's on your heart to share.
And people can also contribute in chat too if they're interested, and that can be another mode for people sharing what they appreciated about the sharing that just took place or those commonalities.
Don't be shy. We appreciate vocal, verbal, text, however medium you want to communicate. Carol said the woman versus male. I'm assuming is that perspective, the woman perspective versus male perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we were looking at the three of us in our breakout room was we all kind of are the same of the similar generation. And ours was more about, you know, the women, even if they had gone to college, you know, the men were getting the jobs and the women were supposed to be, you know, the secretaries, and, you know, and how do you break through that? And we had some similar experiences. And that women actually were very influential in my journey. And it was almost as if, and we had similar, that was similar as well. So that was kind of, you know, our experience. Like a woman would have to kind of like, you know, put herself out there to take you under their wing.
Yeah, no, that just, I can only imagine, you know, as a male myself, I don't want to kind of give too much my perspective in that area, but no, I think that shows the benefits of really finding kind of people that you relate to or people that can see you for kind of where you're and that goes into mentorship. We just came off of ILC, you know, mentorship and whatnot. So that definitely shows the benefit of still finding your tribe, but understanding that you can go out into the world and interact and knowing your strength within that going forward. So appreciate you for sharing. Some others in the chat here. I did have things handed to us. Recognizing privilege. I'm assuming that's like having things handed to you and recognizing the privilege within that. Inspired by the risk and by partner. Inspired by the risk my partner took in her life to expand her exposure to many cultures and now lives in Kenya.
Yep. Matthew, I'll share one thing that the theme in our group was that we did have doors opened for us. That even though we had an initial struggle in a man's world back in the 70s, we aged ourselves, we realized we were all around the same generation. But we also realized that the doors were open if we, you know, because we had still more privilege. And the aha moment for us is that we could not imagine what it would be like for someone of a person of color who can't change who they are, the color of their skin. They could work just as hard, and that barrier in society stayed. For us, you know, we busted through it, and so we recognized the privilege that we had.
Yeah, no, that's great, Eileen. You know, even in my experience, you know, I've always been told you got to be twice as good just to, you know, get the same recognition sometimes. And, you know, just identifying that, and, you know, everybody kind of balances their own, I guess, hurdles or roadblocks based off how society perceives them. You know, we just heard about, you know, how women had to kind of get over their own roadblocks and hurdles coming up throughout history. Then same thing with just being, you know, a Black individual in society and having those roadblocks. So recognizing the privilege and recognizing, at least being aware of your privilege and how that can have an impact on your experience and others' experience is, I think, a really good just observation and first step into being a more conscious leader. And I'll just kind of keep the floor open for one more minute here just to see, any other insights that anybody had, any other inspiring moments that were shared. Looks like something in the chat here.
One thing the three of us, I think, had in common was that people had high expectations, or at least a set of expectations about us that we grew up with without ever asking for, that they were just expectations that seemed to be automatic.
No, Sarah, that's a good point as well. And I think that's something that I personally, from my own just knowledge base, and somebody can chime in if they've had a different experience, but it doesn't get talked about as often, of what's it like when you're expected to be of a certain caliber or a certain, expectation based off your race or, your culture or your, social class or what have you. And you were born into that. You didn't ask for that. You didn't, you might have not had those certain aspirations. But yeah, that could be almost a form of racism in itself, of just putting certain expectations of, oh, you have to be this kind of person because you're in this kind of, social class or culture or what have you. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing. That's a great point. And unless, there's, for the sake of time, I would love to hear everybody's story. There's some good perspectives in the chat as well that, I would love to continue just hearing more about maybe at a later time, but unfortunately we only have an hour together. And as we kind of set in the beginning, we can't solve this in an hour. We wish we could have more time with you all, but thank you for going through that exercise and sharing your perspectives and experiences. And hope it was rewarding and enlightening experience for you all as well. So with that, I will kind of pass it over to Joel to share more about polarity mapping and to dive deeper into that for everybody.
Yeah, and we chose this intro activity of thinking about your birth and your life journey specifically to start to peel apart one polarity that connects with what we just did, which is there's the story of the individual. And so we want to honor everyone's individual journeys, their life experiences and such. And in doing that, we're actually walking through a polarity map right now. So as the storyteller, when we listen to each other's stories, you're often feeling heard. And empathy can come along with that, and people learn about you. There's the ability of creating some connections that take place there. So that's a real positive thing that we want to do, which is how do we honor everyone's individual journey? Even though, I don't want to say even though, what we need to recognize is that, sometimes when we're born into this world, as we just experienced, we're born with certain benefits and drawbacks. There's positive and lights to all of those things. And so, how do we better understand those things that are sometimes beyond what we just see? So we need to do that in dialogue and conversation. And so, if we don't do that, we can actually fall into the trap here of, making up your own story about what you see or your past experiences that can form assumptions. These can all get into different type of biases that aren't grounded because you're not operating off of real data from a conversation or truly letting people, individuals share more about themselves. So we need to keep that in mind, that there's a downside if we're not doing this. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, as we think about the other end of the polarity here, community, the more we start to connect with people, the more we often start to care. We can think about people belonging and feeling more comfortable in a group. And in organizations, if we're needing to think about, well, what's the best role for Matthew or for Joel? The more we know about their motivations, their interests, the more we can think about this could be the right career trajectory for this person. So the more that we do some of this and we start to think about building out the whole, the community, we can better integrate things and create greater synergy. And of course, there's a downside when we don't focus on community, and we'll talk a little bit more about this too, but you know, things can be a little disjointed or disconnected if we're not thinking about how things fit together. So there's kind of an upside of each of these poles, and there's a downside. And so we want to focus on the upsides, and we want to focus on the concept of and. And we'll share a little bit more about polarities as we continue to go through this. But we also want to recognize that, you know, there's a greater purpose that's often motivating the polarity of individual and community, or the joint poles that actually, when positively leveraged, can point to broader inclusion. And if we're not doing, if we're not honoring and paying attention to the upsides, and we're getting caught in the downsides of these poles, we can really go towards excluding people or having people not feel heard or valued. So this is a simple polarity map that just maps back to what we just did. So we wanted to use that as a little bit of an intro activity and start to connect this. Now, we do want to explain that in this past slide, right, we were talking about and thinking, the pole of individual and the pole of community. And so if we get trapped and we don't use and thinking, which is kind of a cornerstone of polarity mapping and on a polarity approach, you can overemphasize on an upside. So yeah, we can learn and we can really focus on the individual and set systems and structures that are really beneficial towards that upside. But if we're not paying attention to community, we can often, you know, build in elements of things being disjointed because we're overly focused on autonomous individuals and, you know, individual rights being supremely important, and that can have a downside here. And so just the same, if we're using or thinking and we're only focusing on this upside around connections, belonging, role, fit, synergy, building things together that support how we come together. If we're only doing that, we're going to have a downside here. Okay, so we want to think about, you know, an example here that might help, because many of us work in organizations, is we often do strategy work and we start to realize that, you know, hey, we might have an individual business unit that might be on the individual end. And when we focus on the individual side and we're focusing on autonomous business units and all the benefits that come along with that autonomous unit, we can start to think about, boy, they can innovate really quickly. They can create systems that are really beneficial towards that individual unit. But the broader community might be the entire organization, and how the organization wants to have things that are integrated there. And so when we get stuck in this or thinking, we can build out a strategy, and we might use a gap analysis strategy saying, well, we're doing this really well and we need to get to the other side. But the gap analysis strategy often operates on an or type of approach. So you do one, and it's like that pendulum that we know that swings. You go from, oh, we need to do individuals work or autonomous business units. And then you're like, oh, wait. We need to get over here to build interconnectedness within our organization or community. And then, oh, wait, we're doing this too much. And so or thinking has us kind of going back and forth. And what we want to do is we want to use polarity thinking as a way to think about, hey, how can we take the benefits of both sides and build a strategy that gets us towards greater inclusion, if that's the one that we're working on. So I've just shared a lot, I know that, and I want to summarize some of these main points of polarity thinking. And of course, we want to be connecting this to how can this help us unlearn racism? I mean, that's why we're here today, and we will continue to explore that. So when we talk about polarities and two poles being an interdependent play, it's the idea of part and whole. It's the idea of individual and community. It's the idea of centralized and decentralized. Those are all two ends of the poles. And what you need to know is that each of those poles need to be either positive or neutral. Because if you have one of these poles being positive and the other one being negative, you know, you're going to automatically have a leaning towards one side of the pole. So they need to be an interdependent pole. And again, as a type of an example, and one that I love to bring up because it's one that we're doing regularly throughout the day, and it really helps you hone in on the importance of and thinking as a part of the polarity process, is inhale and exhale. So everyone with me for a moment, just go ahead and breathe in and exhale, and take 2 more breaths in and exhale at your own pace. And so you've probably just felt some of the positive, the upsides of the 2 poles here. Inhale, you're bringing oxygen into your body. It might also help relaxing you. Exhaling, you're of course releasing CO2. So all of these things can start to help. So we really want to hone in on the and approach of the poles. And I mentioned this being a balanced approach where there's neutral or both of them are positive, working towards a greater approach. I've named some of these already, but you can start to see that inhale and exhale gets to maintaining life. And part and whole can be about inclusion for everyone and honoring individual preferences and communal preferences. And so the summary here is, of course, this requires and thinking. And so we are only going to be able to go so deep into polarity mapping today, but we want to get some of these foundational elements right so that we can start to explore how a polarity approach can help us unlearn racism. So I just named part and whole. That's another way of thinking about individual and community. And what you should know as you get deeper into polarities is that there are many different words that we should all feel comfortable adapting. So if there's words on a screen that aren't connecting, like you don't understand or resonate with part and whole, well then make them work that are, again, neutral or positive, that can be individual and community, or centralized or decentralized, or whatever the pole is that you're facing here. And so this is generally the polarity map. There's an energy sequence so that you're building the upsides of both of these. And again, you're getting towards what I talked about earlier. This is and thinking playing out specifically with some polarities that are around, that address diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so polarity mapping, Polarity Partnerships, who we've partnered with, has identified these 4 as pretty critical ones for doing the work of unlearning racism, or creating anti-racist organizations, or addressing some of the challenges that come with racism, persecution, and any of those things that might be synonymous there. So if we apply the and thinking here, we want to think about what are the benefits of equitable action and affirmative action. Okay, affirmative action might have some negative connotations for some people, but the idea here is each of these has some upsides that can help us build towards a greater purpose. And that might be around inclusion, equality, justice, all of these different elements. And claiming power and sharing power can play out in the same way. And this is where part and whole can actually exist here too. So if you layer in, claiming power for any individual group or in the individual, if we over focus on that, it comes at the expense of sharing power for a greater whole. So you can see how part and whole is connected with some of these. And then there's around stability and change, and diversity and commonality. So we want to get towards this and thinking, because otherwise we can get trapped in or thinking, and that's going to leave the downside of one of these not being honored. So I'm moving forward here because I want to get you into the next breakout group here. And so individual and or community can have these negatives. This is a review from earlier. So just want to show that if we're only focusing on the upside of one pole, there's the diagonal that can be a negative on the other side. So as I said, all of these are created to inclusion. They're Jedi polarities that Polarity Partnerships has named, and we can do more on these in future sessions, but we just want to introduce these a little bit more. So if we overly focus on this upside of claiming power and speaking my truth and being heard, you are at risk of that diagonal showing up as well. And so again, if you do this on the upside, hearing others, and you're only focusing on that, you're going to have that diagonal on the downside that's going to be the challenge. And these can be very dysfunctional ways of being if we're only doing part of the polarity. Okay, I want to get you into a breakout that's going to have you identify one of these on this screen. And so you're going to need to remember those. So we're going to take a minute right now, and you're going to identify one that you're pretty good at as far as that maybe helps you with unlearning racism or being in a situation that requires you to use and thinking. And then you're also going to identify one that you need a little bit more time with. You might need to learn from others about. So one that I'm going to point to here that really helps me with entering into situations that can be challenging is advocacy and inquiry. And so I can advocate all day for my own perspective, my own point of view, the strategy that I want within an organization. But what I need to do often is I actually need to think about engaging people in more questions and use an inquiry approach to better understand other people's journey, process, strengths about contributing towards a strategy. So advocacy and inquiry is one that I'm working on. So with that, I'm going to give you about another 30 seconds or here, and you're going to go into a breakout room for 10 minutes. And you're going to talk and share briefly about one that you're doing well and one that you need a little bit more time on.
Not enough time.
Yeah, I knew that as we were going into that, and I think we gave you a little less than 10 minutes, but all of this is meant to be opportunities for us to continue to expand conscious leadership, right, in ourselves and the dialogue. And we will be doing more polarity sessions, and we'll build on this even as a topic. So Rebecca, since you jumped in, what would you have liked to have talked about more?
Well, so we all really focused on the one polarity around claiming power and sharing power. We all had a common connection around that. It's just that we experienced it in different ways. So it was really interesting. So we were just getting a little bit more deeper into that about how we experienced it differently, our strengths and our opportunities to grow.
Well, hey, something I can encourage everyone to do to continue to build community connections and learning is you can direct message some of the people that you've been talking with and just trade emails, and think about having a follow-up coffee hour by yourselves just to continue the conversations. We need to be talking more about some of these polarities and applying and thinking. And what I want to invite people to do is just drop in chat. What was a polarity that you would like to spend more time with? Because a next session that we could schedule could be focusing on one that really a lot of people would like to do more. So, sharing power and claiming power, we could do a full polarity map around that, and we can go deeper with that, Rebecca. So we'd love to hear what people are interested in. Glad to see the thumbs up out there. And I'm just going to look over here at chat too. So there's often unfinished business with this, which is always, it's great that nothing has popped up that we haven't been able to unpack, because that's always a challenge in doing this type of work. So advocacy and inquiry, thank you, Diana, for sharing that one. Claiming power or assuming power. I think there are some different ways to say this, Howard. So keep those in mind. And we are going to want to end on time. So I'm just going to roll through, recognize that we're going to need to continue conversations going.
All right.
And just make sure you're on mute if you're if you're not talking. So we just did that breakout. And what I do want us to do is just spend a moment here reading this slide. I'm going to be quiet. We could probably go into a whole nother breakout room and just talk about this slide. But my point in bringing this one up is that Barry, who's really the author of Polarity Partnerships and a couple of books that we'll share with you, he has actually mapped power and love on Martin Luther King's quote here to help us understand how power and love is a polarity, and we need to think about how we manage both of those. How do we manage the upsides of these for the benefit of justice at its best? Again, there is more and more that we can talk about here. Now, what I want to tell everyone is that there is a 5-step process here to really go through the polarity approach. And we knew coming into this, as Matthew said, that A, we weren't going to be able to solve, racism in this. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to begin to explore how a polarity approach, how polarity thinking and polarity mapping can actually help us with applying and thinking and really use a polarity map as a way to bring the wisdom of different stakeholders together so that we can go through steps that build out a better system, strategy, approach in community, organizations, families. And so we've only done 2 steps here in the process. And what I want to remind you of is, as a takeaway, we are breathing a polarity every moment. And so hopefully that can act as a mnemonic device, as a reminder to be like, oh, I am breathing. What are polarities that I'm facing, or how I can apply polarity thinking to my life and the situation that I might be in? And it's about moving from or thinking to and thinking. We talked about this energy loop earlier. So we want to leave you with, here are 2 of Barry's books. We are going to send you a couple of chapters from these books that specifically focus on racism, social justice, other issues that get into big challenges of which polls can really help. Margaret, who I said is on here, she helped facilitate a session this past summer at the Leadership Forum Summit. That is a recorded session that's out on our YouTube channel. And it's about the Illumination Project, how they used a polarity approach to map different stakeholders' responses to police a shooting and involving the police in responding to the shooting down in South Carolina. Much, much bigger story there, but it's worthwhile to go back to that one and look at. So all I want to end on really here is thank you, thank you, thank you. Just showing up and being interested in this topic is important. We hope that you take away at least something that will help you. We will put a survey out there, an evaluation. Feedback is a gift. We will be offering other opportunities for us to follow up on the power polarity that we talked about or other ones. But Polarity Partnerships is a strategic partner of the Leadership Forum, and we look forward to doing a lot more because we think it's one of the tools that can help us individually expand conscious leadership as well as help do it in other people. So thank you for joining. We are a nonprofit. We appreciate donations. Thanks for considering that. Matthew, fist bump. Thank you for being a good partner. Unlearning Racism team, fist bump. Eileen, you were a great thought partner. Cliff, nothing but kudos to the community, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. We'll hang around here if anybody has questions or thoughts.